Always true.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 was a turning point for Europe. It struggled to deal with the largest war in the continent since World War II and is working on rebuilding its defense capabilities. The aftershocks of the conflict led countries, including Finland, to end their decades-old policy of neutrality and join NATO in 2023. Among NATO member states, Finland has the longest land border with Russia and has always had to juggle how to maintain its strong military capabilities without risking a confrontation with its neighbour. I am Hashim Ahalbarra in Helsinki, and this week I will be speaking to Elina Valtonen, Finland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, about the war in Ukraine, Russia, and the chances of a deal that may end the war soon, post-governance in Gaza, and the future of the EU-US relations. All of this as Elina Valtonen talks to Al Jazeera. Ms. Elina Valtonen, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
You said many times that the West should not let down Kyiv. Are you happy with the level of Western financial and military support for Ukraine so far?
It could always be more, but then again, I mean, we have to rely on the support we get from our taxpayers, and luckily we are now venturing into, for instance, using the frozen assets by Russia, because it is only fair that Russia is made to pay for the pain it's causing, not just on the battlefield, but obviously while it's deliberately targeting civilians.
On the frozen assets, did you manage to convince the Belgian Prime Minister on the need to unlock those frozen assets, particularly in Belgium, to allow for Ukrainian reparation loans?
I think the Belgian government knows exactly how important it is to make use of those assets. But of course, we, not only Belgium, but the rest of us in the European Union, we want to make sure that we are working based on international law and the laws that we have created ourselves. And the longer the war drags on, there is more and more also judicial reasoning for making use of the assets. But of course, we have to back up Belgium, but also the rest of us. If there were any also financial or political consequences because of this.
When you look at the military developments on the ground in Ukraine, you have an army which is largely outgunned, outmaneuvered, outnumbered compared to Russia. Do you have any concerns that ultimately the Ukrainians will be limited in what they will have to achieve?
I think the question needs to be asked, what will ultimately happen with Russia? I mean, clearly, this has been a massive mistake made by the Kremlin to start the full-scale invasion in the first place. I mean, if we look at Russia's diminished position in geopolitics and how this only drags on, so essentially not even having essentially a way out of something which costs them not only a lot of soldiers, costs them a lot of equipment, costs them a lot of money, lost opportunities, and obviously the international status, which has gone down the drain, despite, having this full cooperation with China. But then again, of course, China makes use of the situation. So this is, I think, the correct sort of posing of the question. And also, if we look at how Russia has, for instance, been able to achieve anything over the course of the past, 12 to 18 months, it's nothing. They have lost thousands and, thousands of soldiers or hundreds of thousands of soldiers in total, massive amounts of equipment, and they haven't gained one strategic victory over the course of the past months. So, I think now would be the time to ask why still continue the war. Of course, they should not have started the war in the first place, but now would be the time to end it.
To end the war, you need to have a settlement. What would be the ideal way out of this war?
Well, if we look at this from the global perspective, obviously this is not only about the future of Ukraine, this is not only about Europe. I think this is about the future of multilateralism and the UN Charter. So effectively, if there was any settlement which was in contradiction with the UN Charter, then I think the rest of us in the world should ask, what is the purpose of the UN Charter in the first place? And I am making specific reference to such clauses in the Charter, such as territorial integrity and sovereignty of nations.
Since you mentioned territorial integrity, if the price of a peace deal with Russia would entail annexation of Crimea, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and areas of Zaporozhye, would you accept that?
Well, if we not only accept, but I have heard voices basically pushing Ukraine towards, accepting some sort of concessions in order to just have some sort of peace. I wouldn't even call that peace, but let's talk about that later. I mean, I'm not sure whether all of these parties realize what they're essentially asking of Ukraine then.
We are yet to see if there's going to be a meeting between Trump and Putin. There were talks about perhaps Budapest. Do you trust that Putin genuinely wants peace?
Well, Putin wants all over Ukraine. Putin wants domination. So at best, I guess some sort of a peace deal will be something that gives Russia a pause to think about the next step. Still, I'm not that worried, because I think what we should be doing is now pushing, and I hope there was a global push for this, for an immediate ceasefire, because the killing needs to stop. I fully agree with President Trump on this.
Alexander Stubb said that Trump is the only one who can force Putin to the negotiating table. But when you talk to people at the EU, they will tell you it's not just about style. It's more about ensuring that we have all the leverage that we can use to ensure that the deal is not going to be perceived as an act of surrender for the Ukrainians. And this is where they are pretty much concerned, because they don't know anything about the details of what could happen between Trump and Putin.
Yeah, well, Trump and Putin can agree on issues which concern the United States and Russia. Everything that concerns Ukraine is for Ukraine to decide, and what concerns Europe is for Europeans to decide. I wouldn't be so worried about these different formats taking place. If there's a genuine will to find peace and find an agreement which is acceptable not only to the parties specified, but also to the global community, then of course, there are parties to jump to the table and fill in the gaps. I don't think that's so much the issue, but our analysis is quite clear. I mean, Russia is not interested in peace. The only way to make Russia interested in peace is two things. Well, first of all, change their calculus, because obviously they are seeing that the economy is weakening by the day. They are definitely not doing great right now, and especially in the long term, the outlook is extremely bleak. And second, make the military calculus such that essentially they are not making any gains. And also, what comes to the rest of the world, they shouldn't even try, because our defense and deterrence is good enough.
Do you think a trilateral meeting between Putin, Zelenskyy, and Trump could lead to a breakthrough?
Well, certainly hoping it might happen. But again, I mean, how the Russians see this is that if there's something to be gained, if there's an easy victory somewhere, of course they will go and get it. And unfortunately, Putin doesn't put much weight on the value of human life. He is willing to sacrifice as many soldiers as are only needed, and also apparently civilian casualties also, just in order to be able to show at home some sort of a victory. And that is, of course, extremely unfortunate, but that the world should realize that it's really just about that. And of course, he's worried about his own position. So he needs to be able to print something in the press at home.
Do you have still the same concerns you had in the past, not as Finland, as EU, that the Russians would use all their leverage to ensure that the EU is sidelined from any crucial peace talks about the future of Ukraine?
Well, you see, I don't think you can sideline the European Union. I mean, as I said, independent of what format you're using for talks, at the end of the day, you can't ignore the agency of Ukraine. I mean, look at what Ukraine has achieved over the course of the past, especially the past 2 years. But also right in the beginning, everybody thought, and certainly that was Putin's calculus, that they would take Kiev in 2 weeks. Never happened. And even in the first weeks, there wasn't any Western help whatsoever in that country. So it was the brave Ukrainians who did that. And also thereafter, now in the past months and, those 2 years, not only has there been minimal gain on the battlefield from the side of Russia, again against massive losses of personnel and material, but Ukraine has been able to build one of the most competitive defensive industries in the world. So certainly it doesn't look like Putin is winning.
The EU is working on a new sanctions package against Russia. It's 20th. Will it be adopted despite possibly the Hungarians and the Slovaks expressing or vetoing the move?
Well, you see, I'm extremely proud of the European Union. We have been able to pass already 19 sanctions packages, each and every one of those with full consensus, and I have no doubt that we wouldn't be able to do that with the 20th one. On the very contrary, a couple of weeks ago when we were able to adopt the 19th package and together with the Americans impose significant also sanctions on the energy sector of Russia, we do really see significant progress. And again, the reason we have to do this is to force Russia to end its illegal war, nothing else. That is why we are imposing the sanctions. Of course, the world would be a better place if there was, free interaction and free trade, even with Russia. But that's basically the place where we started 4 years ago, and still they invaded a neighboring country. But now we do observe that the sanctions do play a significant role in weakening the Russian economy. They have very high inflation. Their leading rate is at 17% now. It was even above 20%. For political reasons, they apparently have had to lower it. But even 17%, which is the sort of the benchmark rate, but on top of that, you would need to pay even higher interest rates as a normal company. It's of course not sustainable at all. And the reason Russia has been able to grow, well, now it's not growing at all any longer, is because they have pushed so much public money into the military industry or the military complex, and that's certainly not benefiting the average person on the street at all.
But why aren't you imposing full sanctions, 100% on the Russians, if the ultimate goal is genuinely trying to force the Russians into going to peace talks?
I think the European Union started off, and together with other partners, of course, with such steps which were, we could calculate that, what the outcome is, and also quite many of the packages thereafter have focused on countering the circumvention of those sanctions. So that for one. Second is that, of course, everybody hoped in the beginning that this full-scale invasion wouldn't last that long. I mean, nobody probably thought that it would take 4 years, which, of course, is a testament to Ukraine's will to defend their own liberty and their freedom, which they are fully entitled to, but also their ability, and also versus the relative weakness of Russia. So, I think we are now in a phase, and we have been over the course of the past almost 4 years, of ramping up the pressure through the sanctions, and the better ideas we have, and the more ability there is also, again, through consensus to agree on these packages, the better. And also what we have seen, what has been extremely powerful in reducing the amount of income that that Russia is making through its oil, especially oil exports, is the oil price cap. But after the introduction of the oil price cap, Russia came up with a shadow fleet. So, for instance, still 3 years ago, there wasn't any shadow fleet to tackle with, and these days, a significant part of our sanctions packages do deal with the shadow fleet.
I'll take you from Ukraine all the way to the Middle East, and let's talk a little bit about Gaza. There's a fragile ceasefire.
Yeah.
Do you see the potential for a permanent agreement?
I always have to see the potential for permanent peace agreement, and definitely, I mean, I guess in this role, even though it's difficult, you need to remain an optimist. But of course, things are very, very difficult. And to start off with, the ceasefire, of course, only deals with Gaza only. For instance, what happens on the West Bank is completely left out, and it's not very good what's happening. So many things to be taken into account. And of course, what we have seen as well, and which has been the demand of the international community, and certainly also what Finland is demanding, is that Hamas is taken out of governance and disarmed. And that would be a very, 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 very tedious task.
That could be the most delicate task, which is basically the post-governance in Gaza. Are you of the view that the Palestinian Authority should be allowed to come back to Gaza, take over, a rejuvenated, as the Europeans and the Americans say, a rejuvenated Palestinian Authority?
Well, I think a rejuvenated Palestinian Authority, a civilian authority committed to peace and secure and peaceful coexistence with its neighbors is certainly something that we need in the interim, and then at some point elections, and through the democratic process another, hopefully, civilian administration and governance who is committed to peace again, because that's what the Middle East needs.
Are you discussing committing billions of euros in terms of reconstruction in Gaza? The EU ultimately will have to be asked to step in and provide assistance. Is this something you're debating?
Well, that's not currently something that we are debating. On the very contrary, I think when the last time we spoke with my European colleagues, is that, of course, everybody's happy about this ceasefire, and we do see and we do hope that there's a prospect, at least, for some sort of negotiations which could lead to a more lasting peace deal. But still, you have to remain cautious. The role of the European Union has been very much that of, paying for things. We are the largest provider of humanitarian aid to Gaza. We have kept, over the course of the past months and years, the Palestinian Authority afloat by essentially funding them. We have individually, and as the European Union, we have significant development programs ongoing. We have had with the Palestinian Authority, but also directly through regional cooperation and all sorts of things. So the role of the European Union certainly in the future can not only be to, send money.
Okay.
And we hope there will be many partners around the world who are interested in the reconstruction bit. We certainly are also interested in that. But this needs to be a global task, and we hope that especially regional players will be interested in not only the reconstruction bit, the sort of the economic and business bit of things, but also making sure that the security holds and that there will be peace.
Your country joined the two-state solution declaration in New York, but President Stubb said that when it comes to the official recognition of Palestine, it will have to wait for when time comes. Do you have any idea when that time will come?
Yeah, we have actually published very concrete criteria for that, because, of course, the two-state solution is the only viable solution for the region. And we are fully in favor of recognizing the state of Palestine at the time when the criteria are met. And one of those criteria is already met, which is the release of the hostages, which was, of course, a very, very welcome step. But then what will be more tricky is disarming Hamas and having Hamas out of the governance, and also other terrorist groups, because not only does the state of Palestine have the right to exist and for peaceful existence, but so does Israel. And before these two issues are solved, it's difficult from the outside to see, and especially to impose any peace.
Let's talk about Russia. I've recently traveled along the Finnish border with Russia, met with people, and I could obviously tell that there is an issue here, particularly the economic impact of the closing of the borders. It was an economic impact that started way before, after the annexation of Crimea. And people were hoping to see a fresh start, maybe an end to the closing of the borders. How would you describe your relationship with Russia?
There isn't any political relationship at the moment, and simply because we don't see any reason to be in interaction really before Russia not only ends its war against Ukraine, but also starts to adhere to international law. But of course, we do have diplomatic relations, and we have relations operationally, for instance, dealing with the border, which is good because, it's these daily issues that need to be taken care of. And it's extremely unfortunate. Mm-hmm. All of Europe was, all of the world was very involved with Russia before, especially before they took Crimea, and also all the months leading up to the full-scale invasion. Let's think about it. It was only 4 years ago when Europe was still building a gas pipeline with Russia, right? So when Russians are claiming that they were kind of pushed to do something, they weren't definitely pushed to do anything, because everybody wanted to be involved with them through trade and also politically. There was a lot of political engagement during the months leading to the invasion. And obviously NATO was not a threat to Russia because it's a defensive alliance, and plus there's nothing we basically want out of Russia other than that they stay behind their border. They have the largest land mass already in the world, so why wouldn't that suffice? So anyway, we don't have an active dialogue ongoing at the moment, but of course it would be great if there was a possibility for that again in the future. And what I'm thinking about is the Russian people, the Russian civil society, unfortunately living under significant oppression, but also deprived of real news, what is happening in the world, and also the positive outlook, what they would deserve as a full democracy and an open society, but also with, again, new engagement with the West as well, because we could be partners instead of, being in a situation, stuck in a situation like this.
The Russians described your decision to join NATO as an historic mistake.
Yeah, well, what can you say? For Finland, of course, joining NATO wasn't a massive step in the end, because we had been partnering up with NATO for the past 30 years anyway, and Finland has always invested heavily in its own defense and deterrence, simply because we know that despite all the, I should say, also wishful thinking, in our backbone we have known that Russia can come back also as a military threat even. So that's why we never let go of our conscription-based army. We never let go of our significant defense targets, even long before we joined NATO. And again, Finland, not even as part of NATO, is a threat to Russia. We are not a threat. We just hope that things would go back to Russia adhering to law again.
How do you see the surge in recent drone and fighter jet incursions into European airspace, and also the ongoing hybrid warfare?
I think what comes to the hybrid warfare, which is certainly there, especially in the information space, we have to be extremely careful to talk about the specific incidents, because before we know exactly what has happened and who's behind it, whether it's intentional or no, I wouldn't be willing to comment whether it was, Russian hybrid warfare or whatever, because quite many of these incidents have actually nothing to do with state-sponsored actions. But what we do see is that Russia is truly engaged in formatting the information space, which I think is the most powerful tool at their hand. And they have been quite successful in using that over the course of the past decade, I should say, causing many people in the West even to, doubt whether the expansion of NATO or whether something we did led to Russia having to invade a neighboring country, which sounds a little bit ridiculous, but many people still believe that, even though, if you look at how NATO expands, Finland and Sweden are the best examples. It's not that NATO comes with arms, and steals countries from another place, but it was the free people of Finland and Sweden who essentially wanted to join NATO, and again, not to offend anybody, but simply to feel safe together.
Are you confident at this particular stage that EU-US relations is much stronger than ever, or at least you've managed to weather the storms that were potentially going to undermine that relation?
NATO definitely is the strongest it's ever been. Now also with the decisions we made last summer to ramp up our defense and deterrence up to 5%, fantastically important, and so good we are undertaking those steps. And also the relationship between the European Union and the USA is certainly very, very good. And also what comes to, for instance, these tariffs and trade issues, of course, I would have wanted, and I guess for the European Union, for Europe, and I should say for the free world, we should still aim at having a free trade zone, essentially, between countries who think alike. But where we are now is not too far off from that. That's fine. Let's continue on this. And I guess at the end of the day, it's about the free choice of people, and that's what we have to protect together.
Elina Valtonen, Finland's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.